Pleasure to be here. I'm going to tell you a little more about myself as I go on, but the first thing I want to say is this. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yeah.
I was born in Pittsburgh. I grew up about an hour to the southeast, about 8 miles from where Flight 93 crashed. So for me, 9/11 always meant something different, and I want to start by telling you guys about that. They said to remember the Alamo. They said to remember the Maine. Next time they say never forget, ask them, what have you got to gain? Because every time you hear that refrain, they just want some land, maybe from Spain, maybe in the Middle East. And whenever they tell you to remember the ill-fated 11th of September, they never want you to focus on the fact that everyone came together. On that day, 10 assholes hit 2 towers, and before they fell, they burned for hours, while hundreds of people climbed the stairs wearing all the gear that people must wear when they are one of those that we have hired, to run not away but into a fire. And those were just the first of the everyday heroes, thousands that came running down to ground zero, not just firefighters, but police and paramedics pulling all-nighters triple duty like sleep, forget it, because out there in the ash and the rubble, there could be one more person hurt and in trouble. So they dug and they dug and they dug. As the days turned to weeks and their lungs turned black, because they knew no matter what, their families would want their bodies back. When they tell you never forget, they don't mean any of these facts. They say remember, but don't take the time to remind you of the giant impromptu evac. See, while the towers burnt in Manhattan, no one knew what next would happen. The island was choked with dust and smoke, and the subways and bridges were shut down. People started jumping in the East River to flee what they feared was a killing ground. So the Coast Guard went for broke. They hopped up on the radio calling, anyone with boats. And from all directions they came, tens of thousands in anything that would float, like proof you can find all you need in the hearts of ordinary folks. 4 places would have been hit that day if the assholes had had their way. The only reason it was 3 and not more was the people on plane number 4. Some of them had kept their cell phones on and they heard about the planes hitting the Twin Towers and the Pentagon, and they were shocked and they stopped dead and they were scared. But they said, well, if today is my last day, then I am not going out that way. You still doubt the truth. You need more proof that humans will sacrifice for the many. Mark Sasseville and Heather Penny, sent to get that 4th plane on jet so fast they didn't have missiles yet. They flew off at the speed of sound with one way to bring that plane down. Not knowing the people on board had already put it in the Pennsylvania ground, just knowing their success meant their death. They tell you never forget, but they focus on the flames and forget the rest because they want you to miss what came next. That's why they call it the aftermath. They want your eyes to slide right past human compassion on a scale so vast it seems more than our minds can grasp. The chain of hearts and hands and brains, from the firefighters to the EMTs to the staff in the ER rooms who went knee-deep through a bloodbath, pulling people back from the tombs like this day shall not be your last. They don't want you to remember that. They want you focused on the same handful of frames, the last few seconds of flight of only 3 of those planes, the towers and their halo of flames, and the numbers of Americans slain, because they want your anger and your rage and your pain. They want you ready to be trained. They want you ready to drop bombs out of planes or put 2 in someone's brain. They want you so mad that your mind short circuits. You don't stop to ask, is any of this shit worth it? They're the most basic question. Do heroes take life or protect and nurture it? Thank you, guys.
Okay.
All right, so let me flip it around for a second. I got this shirt when I was growing up out in east of Pittsburgh, and half my football team signed up for the Army. And so on this shirt it has written all the names of some people who died in the first few years of the war. What occurred to me is this: if you were to list all the names of the people on the other side, all the victims of the collateral damage and the bombs we dropped, you would need abandonment stretch across this city. So let me flip it around and ask you guys this. How many of you have seen Star Wars? The original Star Wars. The one where Luke Skywalker blows up a spaceship the size of a moon. And all the people on board, the Imperial stormtroopers, the maintenance workers, and their families, are shredded in a vast explosion. I'm sure that many of you have watched Star Wars, but how many of you have really seen it? The hero Luke Skywalker is a young man on a suicide mission. One day, he's screaming in the ashes of his family, and the next day, he's joined the rebel forces, and We call this blowback. There are very important people who have very expensive teeth. They sit in front of television cameras and debate whether blowback exists, but I think anyone with ears to hear can understand this. People who find their families butchered are gonna be pissed. And we have spent decades leaving loved ones behind for families and flies to find and continue to insist that if we ever talk about it, we will use the term collateral damage to describe the children mutilated by war. Yet somehow, after all this time, we are surprised someone might find we've committed some crimes that we must answer for. Luke lost 2 people, and in return he killed millions, maybe billions. However many it takes to make a spaceship the size of a moon run smoothly, and he never knew how many of them wanted to be there, and maybe he didn't care, but to be fair, their boss was a butcher. He blew up planets on behalf of the Empire, so I doubt his employees ever suffered anything so simple as simply being fired that they were ever allowed to retire. And maybe the only reason they had even applied to be hired was they had a family to feed, and the only way they could see to get them what they need was to shut up, cross their fingers, and get a job making lasers and lightsabers and praying to their god that Vader would vent his anger on some other slob. And again, maybe not. Maybe they never thought about it at all. They just went to work when called and shopped at the Death Star Mall, and by never thinking about it at all, they managed to keep their heads tall. You can kind of imagine them, right? Sitting there like, I'm one of the good guys, I don't really want anybody else to die, I can't really imagine why somebody would want to take my life. Maybe, much like you and I, they could not be bothered. There are photos, testimony, and videos of the slaughter of Vietnamese and Middle Eastern sons and daughters, yet when their brothers and fathers are strangely willing to start killing, we cannot understand why. It's like we wipe our minds and our eyes are blind, because if the guy who is ready to die has blonde hair and blue eyes, that blowback becomes the biggest fucking movie of all time.
Woo. Woo. Oh.
I don't know if you guys ever seen Clerks, that Kevin Smith movie, but he has that one speech in there, and that shit just flipped my head for pretty much all time ever since. I'm trying to knock out a half dozen here real quick for you guys, if that's okay. How do you guys feel about that?
Woo.
All right. So, let me do another heavy one here for a second. I feel like we are slipping into a world of ADD and HD because we think it is progress to go from vinyl to CD to MP3 to streaming scenes on these little shiny screens. We like to flatter ourselves. These are personal pleasure machines. You can push a button and satisfy your desires, and it's always easier to accept than to inquire. And we don't know about COINTELPRO or how far the fiber optic cables go, and there's at least one thing I think you're forgetting. Privacy doesn't have settings. So yeah, I feel like we're slipping into a world of ADD and HD because we don't even see 1 part and 3 of the whole history of AT&T. See, back in 1913, separate but equal was legal. And women were still not legally people. They still could not legally vote, but could be legally raped and choked, and the trees from coast to coast fruited people with purple throats. So you know only rich white men spoke when the Justice Department declared AT&T to be a natural monopoly. The genesis of the information economy was a government-protected and directed monopoly from a time when crime was violating a sign saying which one is the colored line. A time with no telephones, just telegrams. The feds went to Western Union and shook hands so they could get a copy of every single telegram, and what I need you to understand is that absolutely nothing has changed. Power is still enforcing your will by doling out dough and dishing out pain. Time and technology have simply allowed the shooters out there to take sharper aim. From their inception, the agents of the Bureau of Investigation have conducted counterintelligence operations, spying, sabotage, and neutralization, up to and including assassination, and they always got their information from the AT&T Corporation by listening to our conversations. This went on for 70 years, long enough for those clever AT&T engineers to give the world a whole new kind of fear. They designed transistors and integrated circuits, and we're like, that's progress, but is it worth it? They figured out how to make cell phones wireless, but who's to say we, the people, really desire this? People spent those decades marching for human rights while the feds paid for cell networks and satellites. Now the net tracks your every move and thought in bits and bytes, and we're like dogs that don't know we're wearing a leash until someone at the other end pulls it tight. obvious implication of this favored corporation selling cell phones to civilians all across the nation. They want your location to ensure your cooperation. It does not matter if you really believe, all that matters is that you bend your knees. If you continue to pay and do what they say and otherwise stay the fuck out of their way, then you may as well be one of their loyal followers who every month turns over some of your hard-earned dollars to the Church of Progress, where you can push a button and satisfy your desires, and it's always easier to accept than to inquire. So this must be progress. We like what we get, and we choose to forget what we gave in exchange. That the only safe space we really have left is locked inside of our brains.
Cool.
All right, so one of the reasons I think we miss all these things in society is that we're all on drugs all the time. And not just, for all the fun things that we do, but this hit me the other day as I'm having breakfast. Poured out a nice cup of coffee, poured out a Guinness, poured a nice bowl of Girl Scout cookies. Because being an adult doesn't mean you do drugs anymore to have fun. You do them to get by, all types of these things. And I'm about to put a little bit of sugar in my coffee. And it hits me. And a voice in the back of my head says, sugar is a fine white powder. Let me say that a little louder. Sugar is a fine white powder. Let me say that a little louder. Sugar is a fine white powder, and just like crack and smack, it's all wrapped up in money and power. See, coke comes from leaves and opium from flowers, but the granddaddy of the fine white powders is made from beets and cane. People hear the word drugs, they usually think of gangs. They think of cold-blooded killers with Latin last names selling PCP, LSD, and Mary Jane, or moving meth, ecstasy, and crack cocaine. People hear the word drugs, they think shackles, jails, and chains. They think suffering and pain. They think blood money, backstabbing, innocents slain, but there is no such stigma attached to sugarcane. Even little kids get lit. They sit and take hits, getting ripped off their pixie sticks, and no one sees a problem with this because this is a fix that we all crave, and we are not ashamed, although we know it was built on the backs of black slaves.
Okay.
So I tell y'all that sugar is a fine white powder, and I want it to ring in your brains a bit louder, because its story is the same as what's shot in the veins or shot up the nose to get straight at the brain. I'm talking blood money, backstabbing, innocents slain. I'm talking shackles, jails, and chains. I'm talking headless and dismembered remains, little women and children bagging up product and counting out change, and the killers deranged who run the whole game and who teach kids to kill for material gain. And the craziest thing about it is all of these facts are already in your brain. You sat in little rows, frustrated but well-trained, and normalized this shit with the phrase triangle trade. Sugar for rum for slaves. Europeans ruled the waves and got money and power off of little grains of white powder. And none of this history is shrouded in mystery. When the founding fathers sat and authored history, they wrote it as a toast to those who could rip the most from Africa's coast and put them to the yoke on plantations of white powder to fund the guns of white power.
Everybody take a breath.
So much caffeine in that cold brew up there right now.
Speaking of drugs.
Like I said, I'm really happy to be here. I'm going on tour from Laramie to Las Cruces in April, and I'm hoping to go all the way from San Luis Obispo up to Spokane in May and June. And if you guys are all right with it, I want to do 2 more poems for you guys. How's that sound?
Woo!
All right, cool. Question before we do this. Always strikes me, and we are so close to the border right now. Many people here are bilingual, I hope. But how many of you, first question, have heard of the Me Too movement? Show of hands. Hopefully everyone in this room, but how many of you have heard of Ni Una Menos? Now this next poem, I want Me Too to see Ni Una Menos. I want Me Too to see Ni Una Menos. See, the other day, I'm sitting reading the paper about this asshole who took his ex-girl and raped her. Now the judge went and cut this guy 10 years of slack because the girl, in his honest opinion, should have fought back. Never mind the fact that the guy had a white-hot screwdriver and the choice for her was murder victim or motherfucking survivor. For the judge, there was not enough damage, not enough bandages to prove that her ex had taken advantage. And what I can sadly understand is how this is the best our legal system can manage. Now, sure, The judge was called out and reprimanded in public, but he still got a job and a pension. Like punishment? Fuck it. Plus, police expos got corporate arms dealer sponsors, so the cops got surveillance software and rocket launchers. Not to mention body armor, assault weapons, and tanks, yet somehow there is not enough in the bank to pay to test the DNA in the rape kits.
Come on.
How the fuck do police chiefs with straight faces say this? I ain't got a daughter, but best believe if I had one, she wouldn't learn to load a dishwasher before a shotgun, because self-defense sometimes requires tools to get the job done, and as with most problems, stopping rape starts with one. Now, if that kind of talk makes you fear for your sons, for your brothers and male friends, then please, by all means, give them this. No matter your partner, consent should be in no way ambiguous, like respect his or her existence or expect your bits to be pink mist. But it's for the rest of y'all that I came here to spit this. See, I want me too to see ni una menos. And I came here tonight to bear witness to crimes in which we are complicit, to which we consent in the name of big business. See, every other day I'm sitting reading the paper about some country somewhere near the equator where we fuck a few million people over for fabric and minerals and flavors. You think the kids who mine coltan with their hands or the youth picking fruit down in tropical lands ever get to decide when that's enough? Or I don't do that type of stuff. Like someone focused on assault or rape, we're only ever focused on what we can take, and we only ever talk about sweatshops when we talk about what they make. We cut the corrupt, including us, slack. Never mind the fact the conquistadors took the land and never gave it back, that the military goes after civilians while a small handful makes millions. For us, the horror in the maquiladoras and the blood of 1,000 dead reporters are not enough for us to stop being supporters. We like the low prices too much. They're our vices. So economy means commodities and stock prices instead of the people who are living in crisis. You know what I want? What I see in my sueños is a world where me too sees ni una menos. I want us to say fuck this colored cloth and start acting a little more ni una más. I want a woman's right to put threats down, to extend from Hollywood and white to third world and brown. But I need y'all to get together and see the connection so we can together find a new direction out of this world we've built where everything's for sale and we accept behavior that's beyond the pale. And when this whole Ponzi economy scheme fails, you can bet the last words we hear before we die will be filth that for once will not be alive. You were asking for it. I want to grab out real quick for you guys. I have all kinds